Cool.
Here we go.
I've never done one through Zoom before on Facebook.
I think it's a relatively new feature, so we'll see how it works.
It's a good thing. Modern technology, hey? Oh, I think we're live.
Yes, we're live. Awesome. Welcome everybody to our first homeowners webinar. I've got with me today Sammy Russo from A Little Birdie Told Me, who's here to help us chat about it.
Yeah, very exciting. Thank you for having me today. It's so exciting. First home buyers is definitely where my heart is. I love helping first home buyers and building and establishing relationships with them and just sort of holding their hand through the process of it all, because it can be so overwhelming.
Oh, definitely. Like you know, we're all first home owners once, and I did the relatively recently, and even me coming from a background that I do come from, it's so much emotion as well in the process of buying your first home. So yeah, it's great.
Absolutely.
Jump into it. First we're going to talk about picking your house and your land and all the sort of benefits there. So do you want to get us started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do a quick introduction to myself. So my name is Sammy Russo and I do work at A Little Birdie Told Me Real Estate in Seymour. We specialise in land development. So we do a lot of land development within the Strathbogie, Mitchellshire area. And I personally have built 2 homes myself. So I feel like I'm a good source of knowledge for this sort of category of first home buyers. So when you first coming to purchase property, it can be super exciting, but my first number one recommendation is to always go see your bank first. Talk to your bank and see your affordability. I have so many clients come to me and say, oh, I've done the online calculator. I can so afford $600 a week, but there's so much more to it than that. So that would be definitely my first advice when looking for a property is check your affordability. You don't want to outsource yourself or get disheartened down the line as well. So that would definitely be my first sort of tip. So then, if we're talking about picking a property, it's up to you whether you weigh up the opportunity of building or purchasing an established first home. There's so many different factors. If you're in an area where there's no land available, obviously purchasing an established home would be a great option for you. But I would always think about it as a stepping stone into the business. Don't go out and buy a $600,000, $700,000 home as your first home. You can use it as a stepping stone. It doesn't have to be your forever home. It's just about getting into the market and getting that approval. But yeah, if you're doing land, if you are picking land, definitely ask your agent for a copy of the plan of subdivision and engineering, which I'm sure Sarah will talk about in a minute with the vendor statement. But yeah, definitely have a look at the blocks and make sure you're looking for any easements and things like that, and talk to your solicitor about their advice on it. Because there's a lot of misconceptions. People think, 900 square meter block will be perfect for me no matter what it is. But there could be different things that could make it wrong. So yeah, if you want to talk about section 32s and things like that, go for it.
Yes. So, well, I guess from our standpoint, while Sammy's sort of helping you pick the land and find what you're looking for, we're sort of doing some of the back end work to make sure that that land's going to be appropriate for what you need. And the most important document that when it comes to this is what's called a section 32 or a vendor statement, the sort of terms interchangeably these days. And so basically what a vendor statement is it tells you everything you should know about buying this property from a legal standpoint. So that includes the outgoings on the property, so what the rates are, what the water rates are, how big the property is. So it's got a copy of plan in there. So it actually shows the dimensions of the property, because even though a fence may be, down one side and down the other, and you're like, perfect, that's it. Often that's not the case. And it can be a very big problem down the track. And, I know I've seen contracts fall over because the fence has been in the wrong spot. It's a very major thing to look out for. It shows all the easements like you referred to. So an easement essentially is when there's normally something underground, and the most common, I guess, you and I see as part of land developments is sewerage and water. There can be other sorts of easements, on farming properties. There could be big gas lines or something like that. But definitely never done one for states. It's all the sort of the sewage lines. They normally run across the front or the back of the property. And what they can do is actually stop you from building over that bit of land. So even though you own that land, it really restricts your use on that particular portion. For example, at the moment, I'm in the process of putting a shed on my bit of land that I've recently built on, and we have a 3-metre easement across the back, which has sewage under it. So I can't actually put my shed across that easement. And so like Sammy said, a 900 square metre block of land might be perfect for you, and you think, great, I'm going to put a 20 by 20 shed on the back. You might, because it's going to, you got to go into your house zone or something like that. So easements are very important. They are easier if they run across the front of the block, I find, because you're not on your driveway. Whereas on the back, like in my situation, there's more restrictions on what I can do in my backyard. Another really important document that's often in Section 32, and especially in new estates, is covenants. These are also called memorandums of common provision. More commonly now we see them. So they're sort of used interchangeably, and that essentially restricts the way you can develop land. And again, Sammy, you would see this a lot in your estates. It's pretty common, for example, to have that you can't further subdivide land within an estate. So you might buy, half an acre and think, awesome, I could put 2 houses on that. But the reality is you probably can't.
Yeah.
Another really common one is you can't put relocatable homes in new estates.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the biggest ones we find in most new subdivisions. Will have that covenant in it. You cannot put a relocatable home, even if it's a brand new one. You cannot move it to the site. Yeah, definitely a big one as well. Yeah,
another one we see quite often as well is having restrictions on the materials you can use on your home. So you might want a big whiz bang modern home. But the reality is that councils are trying to make sure all houses look good together and there's not one sticking out like a sore thumb. So, you might have to use bricks, restrictions on reflecting materials, all that kind of stuff, along with, fences and all that kind of stuff. So that's another very important thing to look out for. Zoning is another one, which probably isn't as much an issue in smaller new estates. But if, you're buying a bit of land out in the bush, it might be zoned as farming. So it might be very hard to build a house on it, which is another big thing to take into consideration. Obviously, if you buy it as farming land, you can get planning permits, but it's going to be an extra step and it can be quite a lengthy step.
Yeah.
And the final thing to look out for is the outgoings on the property, which is a little bit hard, especially in new estates, but it basically tells you what you can expect for rates on the property, what you can expect for water rates on the property. It doesn't cover things like electricity in that, but it gives some ideas of what the running costs of the property will be in the future.
Yeah, also with if it's an owner's corporation, so a body corporate over an estate too, there is one in the Gambia and the Allura estate. Obviously, it's a different, you have to add that into your budget as well, because there would be a further ongoing yearly cost for that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So there's some points for when you're starting to look for a property, and then we really go into the process of buying a property, and you sort of start with the signing up of contracts and all that stuff, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So after you've had a chat to your bank, you know your affordability, what area and what direction you're going into, I would definitely talk to your agent. So that's what our job is. We're here to help you, guide you on your process. So you might, if you're looking for an established house, you might start looking at homes. I find a lot of young first home buyers bring their family, their parents along. A little bit difficult with COVID at the moment, but we'll get there again. So yeah, definitely find that is a good aspect to get some second opinions and ask all the right questions. We're here to answer any questions that you have. So don't feel like it's a silly question or a stupid question. We're here to help you in that process. So one thing I would definitely ask is the deposit as well. So ask the agent on this particular property, whether it be land or a house, ask what they require as a deposit on the contract. So usually it is a 10 or 5% deposit. 5 can be negotiated. It's not always accepted, but if that's what you have in cash, you can offer that as well. But definitely ask that requirement up front so you know how much cash you have to put down on the contract signing as well. So and always pick your solicitor.
Rise like that, where we had some people buying a house, a bit of land, and they didn't have the money for the deposit because they'd put it towards a house already. And the cart before the horse.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that does make it difficult. You do need to, make sure you are aware of those things. And we'll talk about later the first homeowners grant as well, because when you do apply for that, you can be eligible to put the $20,000 towards your deposit with the bank, not with the agent though. So you do have to have your 10% deposit down with us on signing, or 5% if negotiated. But with your bank, you can use the $20,000 towards the bank deposit. Again, talking to your bank again about what your lend capabilities are. You want to be, 80% is no lender's mortgage insurance if you have an 80% lend. But they do allow up to 95% lend depending on your circumstances as well. But basically I would definitely ask your agent any question under the sun. Ask for multiple inspections if you are buying a house. I have first home buyers that say to me, I want to come through again. Of course, that's okay. You want to have a second look. You want to make sure you know the ins and outs of the property, and this is exactly what's suited for you as well. Yeah. Definitely. That was most of my advice.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Well, I guess once Sammy's really signed you up to the contract, which is, the main point of getting there, and you've paper, and it's a very exciting day when you sign your contracts. I guess you get to experience a lot of that excitement as well.
Yeah. Yeah, when offers are accepted. Yeah.
Yes, it really gets handballed to me to really finalise the matter, I guess. And your agent still stays involved, especially if it's a house, because you do some inspections and all the like. But the agent also stays involved during the process of it becoming unconditional. So when you do sign those contracts, you can make it what's called conditional on certain things occurring. The most common, I think you would agree, Sammy, is finance.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that's, that within 14 days of the contract, you need to get your finance approved by a bank. Standard is 14 days. I don't know about you, but I'm finding 14 days pretty tough to turn around.
Yes. In the COVID state at the moment, we're definitely seeing more 21, 28 days turnaround at the moment. Yeah.
So
one thing I would say that as well is, just quickly, sorry, I get a lot of clients come in and say they've got pre-approval, so they don't need subject to finance, but you absolutely do. If you are borrowing finance, you need to have that finance clause in your contract. The bank likes to see a physical contract to hand on to them, so for approval.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because often they do their valuations afterwards. And if the property comes in undervalued, you're in a very difficult position of trying to come up with capital or something like that. And you'll, once the contract is unconditional, you could potentially lose a 10% deposit. So yeah, that's a really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Some other things that a contract can be conditional upon that we see probably the most are building and pest inspections in existing homes. So that's within 14 days, you can get a building inspector to go out there, or a pest inspector. There's a major infestation, and it is quite an open term.
Yeah, it's very broad.
Quite easily, if it becomes apparent that the house is riddled with termites, you can end the contract under that clause. And that's especially in older homes. I think that becomes more and more relevant as well.
It's a good protection. Absolutely. Yeah.
So normally within 14 days after the contract becomes unconditional, and that's when we really get the ball rolling. You need to be signing your mortgage documents and anything else the bank requires. Then we prepare the stamp duty forms, and we will discuss the stamp duty concessions a bit later on, but essentially we prepare those and we include any concessions in there, and then we need you to sign them. About a week or 2 weeks before settlement, we prepare what's called adjustments. So adjustments essentially are, we figure out the outgoings associated with the property, and we adjust them so that you're paying for the portion of the time you own the property and the vendor is paying for their portion. And you'll often find that your rates will become paid out for the entire financial year, which is a bit of a heads up, I find.
Yeah.
People who've just bought a property and there's expenses going everywhere, to know that your rates are paid till the end of the financial year. Once that's happened, about a week before settlement, we'll give you final figures, and you might have what's called a shortfall before settlement, and that basically is, your bank's providing 100,000, but you need 150,000 to buy the property. You need to fill the gap, and so that's again falls back to sort of finance and making sure you've borrowed enough to cover that, stamp duty, lodgement fees, legal fees, and any other costs that may arise. So it's not just the purchase price that you need to think about.
Yeah.
Stamp duty, and a good mortgage broker, and I think even the banks are very across making sure that those things are covered.
Yep.
And then from there we move to settlement. So settlement essentially all occurs online now, and it's all sort of automated, but funds come from one account and go to the vendor, and the documents get lodged at the land registry, which is when your names show up on title. It's a very exciting day. We call someone like Sammy and we let them know that you're home, which is the bit we always miss out on, I think, because I think
true.
And from there, really, there's a mortgage on title, or if there's not a mortgage on title, we keep the clear title. Titles are all electronic now, unfortunately. You don't really get the bits of paper anymore. Then you're the owner of a property.
Exactly.
So that's very broadly the very cool. I think
the only other thing is, if you do, like you touched on this briefly as well, if you do buy an established home, you will be doing it's not compulsory, which it probably should be, but you do a final inspection with your agent. So probably I personally like to do it 3 days before settlement max, because you want to make sure the property is empty, cleared, everything's there, which basically you're checking for that everything's correct, no one's ripped the dishwasher out, that was in the contract, those sort of things. And it also gives you that last look at it before you take it over. This is how it's going to be on handover. So it's a little bit harder with a rented property. So for tenants moving out, they will have to abide by their condition report with the agent. But if it's owner occupied, it should be like, I had one last Sunday and the property was immaculate. So it was perfectly done. We just walked through and had a quick look around. There was nothing major. It's just your last final inspection for the property. But if there is something wrong, for example, there's a hole in the wall, the dishwasher's missing, it was in the contract, that's when the agent will go back to the vendor and negotiate, and also talk to your solicitor as well about that. Not that I've ever had that happen, touch wood.
Yeah, we've seen it happen a couple of times.
Yeah.
The most common way to deal with that is actually to withhold a little bit of the
Yeah.
purchase monies, and so we hold on to it and the vendor fixes it. Or, you know, we might hold, if the dishwasher's gone missing, we might hold on to $1,000, give that to you back, and you can go buy a new one. But yeah, it's a very good point. I guess the point about doing the walkthrough is it should be in the same condition as when you inspected the property, or when you signed the contract, more accurately. You know, like you said, someone can't go punch a hole in a wall, or you know, bits go walkabout or anything like that. It does need to stay in the same condition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very good point. Next thing we're going to talk about is, I guess, the perks of being a first home buyer, because they are out there. I'm going to talk about the first homeowners grant and the building grant first.
Yeah, absolutely. So very exciting for regional Victoria. So if you want to find out if you are regional Victoria, well, currently we're in stage 2 restrictions, so that's a little bit easier. But there is a website online on the State Revenue Office that outlines every single suburb. But if you are in regional Victoria, you are entitled to $20,000 cash from the government, which is huge. Great incentives. And as I sort of touched on earlier, you can use this with your bank towards your deposit with the bank. So instead of borrowing that extra 20 grand, it can go towards your loan, which is amazing. Yeah. So that's the first one. So to qualify for that, obviously you have to be first home buyer and haven't been eligible for it in the past. You also must be owner occupied. It must be a newly built home, building a home, or an established home that the owner has lived in for the first 5 years. So it has to be a 5-year-old home that only one owner's lived in, that can be eligible for the $20,000. So that is huge advantage. Yes. Big step up on buying that. And also no stamp duty on that. So Sarah will talk about that as well, the stamp duty exemption. But the latest one at the moment that currently going is the $25,000 build grant. So this means as a first home buyer, you could be receiving $45,000. So to touch on a couple of points, there's a couple of eligibility criteria for it. There's an earning income. So you must be under 125,000 as an individual and a couple under 200,000 as a joint income. Yeah. And must be your owner occupier. And you also must sign a build contract on or before the 31st of December 2020. So, and this payment cannot be used as a bank deposit. I have had someone recently ask me about this. So that one cannot be used with the bank. It's not a guarantee with the bank at all because it's such a new grant and deposit. It just gets paid as a cash deposit on build. So I believe it's at the first base payment stage is when you get the cash back and you have to apply for it. One more point to make is you do have to commence building within 6 months of signing that build contract. So for example, say if you sign it in December, you will have to start building by June to be eligible for it. A couple of heads up. But yeah, we're seeing titled land go crazy at the moment because of this $45,000. It's huge.
That's a huge
yeah.
Huge. And so with that building grant, I guess the other issue is that the builders filling up. I know you sort of probably have more experience.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, this is another thing. If you are looking at building and banking on this build grant, ask your builder that if they can fit you in. I on the weekend spoke to Cavalier and Dennis family, and they are already booked out till March, so they cannot take any more contracts till March at this stage. There is some that are still available. Absolutely, they're still making contracts and still being able to fulfill it. But definitely ask that, because you don't want to bank on that $25,000 for something for your furniture, for something that's going on concrete, your shed, and then get to the end and they say, oh, sorry, we're not able to build until end of next year. Absolutely, something I would definitely ask the question. Yeah.
No, very good point. And I guess to follow on from that, the stamp duty concession is up to a certain amount. You can actually get no stamp duty on your first home. And above that amount, you can get a reduced amount of stamp duty. And for land purchases in the country, you're basically guaranteed land prices to pay no stamp duty. So that's a very big leg up. And even on most entry-level homes, you're not going to end up paying stamp duty.
Yeah.
So you can save yourself tens of thousands of dollars. It's a really good incentive as well. And the eligibility criteria for that is the same as the first homeowners grant, which Sammy discussed, but I guess I'll expand on that slightly more. One of the most common questions we do get is, my partner owned a home previously.
Yeah.
Can I get it? And so it's a little bit complicated. It does take a little bit of looking at your individual circumstances. But if your partner owned a home and they never lived in it as their home for more than 6 months, so, let's say 10 years ago, they owned a rental property. They never lived in it, you may still be eligible for that stamp duty concession. So it's good to sort of think about what could potentially, be affected there.
Yes.
So that's a very good point. And then again, another concession we often see that can be used at the same time as the first homeowner's concession is when you buy a property off the plan. So this is when you buy a property that's currently under construction or might not be under construction. And essentially what you do is you only pay stamp duty on the percentage of the property that is built at that time. So, if it might just be
the value of it,
so you might pay stamp duty on the land only. You might have a frame up, for example. We have a client in Kilmore who does this, and we find it for a lot of his purchases. So he might have the frame and the roof on, so that might be 20% of the build done. So you pay stamp duty on the land and 20% of the build costs.
Absolutely.
And so that's worked out on a very complicated calculation that is beyond my pay grade, but it is all done automatically. So that's a very another good sort of incentive. And we haven't touched much on buying off the plan in terms of houses, but that's essentially another good incentive. And combine if you bought in a city area, perhaps that could really reduce your stamp duty to the point you're paying less or no stamp duty as well.
Absolutely.
I think that's about covered all the points we wanted to. Was there any?
Yeah, I just want to have one more thing, two more things actually. Strathbogie Shire. I just remember this one. Strathbogie Shire. So if you currently build a property in Strathbogie Shire as well, you do receive a 2-year rate holiday. So the way to break that down as well, the way that does work is on settlement, you do pay out to the end of financial year, and then you get your next 2 years free rates. So that's super exciting as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Huge. Again, you have to be eligible for the 20,000. So you have to meet every criteria on the $20,000 first home grant to abide by that as well. But yeah, that is a super exciting incentive as well. That one. And my other thing I was thinking of is another thing I get asked all the time is house and land packages. I'll often get people come to me and say, I've seen a house and land package online with, say, Dennis Family. I don't really like that house, but I like the land. So the way house and land packages work is it's like an advertising tool to show you what you could afford or what could be built on this block of land. But basically you can look at any block of land in any estate and put a house on it yourself. So my biggest advice would be, once you do get the plan of subdivision and see the width of your block and the depth of it, you can go online even to the builders' websites and put in those dimensions, and it'll show you what size house will fit on those lots. Obviously keeping in mind easements and things like that, but you can design your own house and then put on all your criteria, so 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, double garage, whatever you're wanting, and then fill out the criteria that way and build your own home and land package, dare say. And then we can do the loan and everything together. You don't have to pick exactly what's online advertised. It's just more of to show you what is available and what could fit on this block of land as well.
Definitely very good point. Well, thank you for joining me.
No worries.
I will post your details in the first comment on our Facebook Live, which will be available on our page.
Yeah.
And I'm always available to review Section 32. So we do review Section 32s at no cost to the purchaser. So if you send them through before you sign anything, we're more than happy to look through. And any questions, I'm sure either of us are available for a quick chat.
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to call me anytime. I'm happy to help any first home buyer, even if you're not building through me directly, you want some advice on something in the area, more than happy to help you. It's definitely my specialty and forte is first home buyers and building. As I said, built 2 homes myself. So I'm happy to answer any questions. There is no silly questions. Yeah. Happy to help or meet up if we can wear our masks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.